of perspective away from the arrow point, where in arrow, of course, you have the distinction between tastes and values. He's saying that ordering of individuals is not necessarily in their self-interest. They are ordering social states according to certain values. But nonetheless, they're given orderings. And the preoccupation has been with the problem of mathematically whether you can aggregate it into a social ordering. You are actually changing the perspective from arrow more to a Condorcet type of perspective, where the idea is changing the orderings themselves through public discussion, through collective discussion. That these are not given things, but they themselves can be changed. Now, one of the things which I want you to reflect upon, or tell us what you feel about it, that collective discussion itself is a form of collective action. Collective action is simultaneously also a discussion, because if I march in a demo, I'm implicitly also discussing something with those who are marching with me. So there is a certain relationship between collective discussion and collective action, like the Women's March recently on Trump. That simultaneously has an enormous educative value. It is an informational value. It is a discussion value. Now, I think the part in collective action is something which you do not say much about. That's one of the things I'd like you to comment on.
I think there are three different ways of thinking about discussion and action. One is that the discussion, of course, is an action. What John Searle in a wonderful book called Speech Act. Now, speech act is what discussion is, etc. So that's an action. Secondly, you have to go somewhere. You can practice soliloquy at home, but you have to go somewhere, ideally, and talk with people. That requires organization. And thirdly, it requires resistance, because if you're trying to say something and you are being not allowed to say something, you have to resist. Now, since I was involved in some student action in my younger days, I'm familiar with all of them. And they can be quite serious issues. Behind that there is also a question of organization. But one has to be careful about whether an organization mainly encourages discussion or discourages discussion. And I think we have to be careful about that too, because I have when I was young and active, one of the main political parties in my college was in the party with which you are associated. You are associated with some successor of that. I was in the Student Federation. In fact, I led it for a while. But Student Federation, but I was not in the Communist Party. The Communist Party had a very powerful influence. Now, a lot of it was very positive. Some of it was not. Some of it was to, there was a broad left, as the terminology goes, but the broader part of the left often did not get the hearing that the central, narrow part of the left did. So I think we have to think about action in the broadest way. And I'm glad you asked the question, because it's something we have to think about, because if we want to broaden the discussion, we have to do what we can to make the discussion as broad as possible. In my case, for example, for many people, debates about Soviet Union began with the 20th Congress. For me, it had actually come earlier. In fact, when I was in President's College itself, which was before, I was in 51, 53, that was 56. And at the 20th Congress was 56. Yeah. So But the trials had already taken place. And read a lot of Bukharin. Bukharin was taken as something like a Lenin substitute. So much so, when he was in favor. So much so that when Antonio Gramsci wants to attack Lenin, but he cannot attack Lenin because no one can attack Lenin. So what he does is to attack Bukharin. And so extensive he was. And then one morning we gathered his note. And then we told that he confessed. I read John Gunter, a sympathetic, quote-unquote, lefty, but not of the party. He was there saying, I could see that he was not being tortured. He was confessing right without any pressure. How the hell do you know? Confessing without pressure. You just saw him in the court. So I think we had a lot of debate. So I would like to say that we want to have the broadest discussion possible. Same thing goes with censorship. Some people rightly are in saying that even, extraordinarily scholarly books on the Hindus could be banned, but did not protect when other books were being banned early on. So I think we have to re-examine, and this is very serious. I mean, I think we have to think. I'm a forward-looking person. There will be elections. There will be new regimes at some stage or other. I'm not predicting what will happen in the UP in case you're thinking that I'm going to do that. But we are all interested in what will happen. I mean, no party is forever. So we have to think about the future. Right now, I'm very involved in trying to do a healthcare plan, which there's no chance of the present government doing. And there was no chance of the last government doing it either. But if you want to have a change, then you have to think about what kind of a big change you want. And similarly, if you want a really free discussion, what are you going to resist? You have to resist this on one side and that on the other. So that's what I would put myself. It would also explain why I stood where I did to the Federation, not the Communist Party, resist being broken up, and also help people who try to seek and try to give them as much aid as possible. That's the way I try to do. I'm not very strong at the age of 83, but as long as I can, that's the way I see myself doing.
Those are the kinds of debates which have, as it were, dogged us for 50 years. The kind of debates you had in your student days are also the debates that have continued ever since and are still going on. There is another thing which I wanted to get your views on, and that's this, that, okay, democracy by discussion, of course. But you see, I mean, let's take the example. In the book, you talk, for instance, about institutions like the power of finance in Europe. Now, Greece is an example where there was enormous discussion. There was a referendum and more or less a kind of, substantial view that Greece must confront the power of European finance. Now, but Greece failed to do that, and that's partly because of the fact that institutions of that kind are difficult to face anyway, to resist anyway. It's difficult, not impossible, but difficult. And partly because we are in a world in which finance is globalized and we are in a nation state. In fact, we end the book by saying that we don't have to wait for a global government. But but the fact remains that we are in a nation state. The Greek state can't do much. Any state doing anything would mean financial outflows. Now, these are kinds of issues, namely democracy, government by discussion, also must entail confronting certain kinds of entrenched institutions. And in today's world, the difficulties may actually be greater. I know you're asking about global discussions, you're not confining discussions to the national space, but nonetheless there is an issue there, and I'd like to draw you out a bit more on that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question because I think we have to discussed it very for the reason that you gave and some more. I once wrote a book called Identity and Violence, and that's concerned with our identities being of different kind. Our national identity is one of them. Our public discussion is often confined to that. What will be the right thing to do in India? But some of our discussions deal with other kinds of identity. If a French woman goes to work in Somalia for the improvement of the lot of women there, what's driving her is not the French identity, but what is driving her is the women's identity, or could be feminist identity. Which, by the way, despite being a man, I strongly have, because of the fact that I won the course and that different identity on a feminist subject. So I think we have to go beyond the boundaries of nation, and that also requires requires us to think in very different terms. I was very fortunate. I didn't do anything to deserve it, but I was made the Oxfam. I was made honorary president. I was for 4 years. It was a fantastic organization. I didn't do very much for it. And this was before it split into different groups, different parts. But I had the fortune of getting informed about what's happening everywhere. That was wonderful. I used to devote the Friday afternoons to it, when we were folks coming in from different countries of Africa, from Afghanistan, from Bolivia, and so on. And it was amazing to see what identity people had, and they risked their lives, went there and did things, and some of them lost their lives. Even when I was president, and there were a number of cases where people lost their lives. It is an extraordinary thing that people are able to reason, and then they decide that this is an argument I trace, I think in the book also, certainly in Idea of Justice. So actually, I first read it in Gautam Buddha, when Buddha is discussing, he's actually going against what people now call the contractarian approach, that I do something because you will do a similar thing to me. And he's saying, it's in a book called Sutta Nipata, and he's saying, that's not the thing to do. I do things because I know that it's the right thing to do. If I think it's the right thing to do, then I don't wait to say, will the other guy do the right thing to do for me? I do it because I know it's good, and once I'm convinced it's good and it would be good to do it, then I should do it. So that's my duty. It doesn't depend on anybody else. He gave it an example. The mother looks after a child, not because the child is something to the mother, and not even as in some economic model, that when they grow up, they will do something. They do it because the child can't do certain things the mother can. He applied it to animals, human beings, animals, whatever. And I thought that many of the people with whom I met and had the company of, were taking these risks because they felt they ought to do it. They had reason that this is a good thing to do. They reason that if they can, they should do it. And they've decided they can, and therefore they ought to do it. And I think these reasonings are very powerful. So, just as when we're resisting people who make confusion about the state of the government and so on, we have to bear in mind that there are also a lot of people who are ready to work for and sacrifice what they can, however they can, to promote what they want to do. Now, you also raise the issue of finance. When finance is an issue, you may remember that you have always been of a scholarly bent, that was a lot of discussion, not only in the Marxist circle, but also in historians like Hilferding and other finance capitalism and so forth. And So I think, I don't know, I have a certain amount of reservation about the modeling of that. Finance is important. I don't think that's the really most important thing. I think, do the media get constrained by ownership? Certainly. To the extent that nothing else matters, I doubt that. And, there have been some media which have been much more free than others. So there is a variety to look at. And is there a case for having some kind of independent rights? Britain has to some extent to the Scotch Start, which publishes The Guardian. They have their own biases, but on the other hand, it's not. It's dedicated as a trust. Is there a case for that in India? Yes, there is a case for that in India. And to some extent in the online, that kind of situation exists. Now, I think we ought to think about that. What I'm not like to put my head down on, or to keep my head up, is that it's so difficult that we can't deal with it. I think we can. If finance capital is a problem, fine, we recognize it, we deal with it, we fight it. And I think the danger, one of the dangers, is to say that, look, we are in a situation, nothing could happen. Even I was talking with someone this morning about improving the university, and they said nothing could happen in the present system that whereby you make the university better. I don't accept it. We have to fight it and then find out whether we can or not. So I think that's the way I would respond to it. But I do agree with you entirely. It's a very critically important question.
Can I just squeeze in one more question before I ask others to come in? I think this identity brings that question. I've been curious, for instance, how you would react. I mean, from the capability approach, for instance, that you have been associated with, how you would react to the following. Suppose we visualize a state that actually provides wherewithal to its people to realize their capabilities, if we just visualize it. But on the other hand, we have prejudices. I ask this because ours is a caste society. It's possible that you can actually have affirmative action, you can have even a stronger egalitarian action where everybody, irrespective of caste, can realize their capabilities, or at least are on the way to doing so. But caste prejudice may still remain. It may not express itself in the public domain in enforcing a deprivation on the oppressed caste. In other words, oppression may go, but prejudice may remain. In other words, I'm hinting at the kinds of issues that, let's say, Ambedkar talked about when he talked about annihilation of caste, not just the end of caste oppression. How would you reflect on those issues?
Well, as Ambedkar, not independently of him, but having read him, and I think that's a great book. And I think he said things also immediately after the Constitution was passed. He said that we're going to live a schizophrenic life. On one side we have equality at the political level, but inequality at social and economic level. And he thought, basically he is hinting that we may be able to use the political equality to do something about economic and social. And actually that's why the affirmative action came in. India was the first country to introduce affirmative action in the Ambedkar part. I think if he had lived much longer, he would have said that some respect it has been successful. I don't take the view that reservation has done nothing. On the other hand, I think it's also the case that a lot more needs to be done, and even now. And has it come to me as a surprise as how much the caste-based thinking has survived even today? I think it has. Because my inclination, given my political thing, was to say that to some extent, as the fluidity of the classes increase, that there will be a corresponding fluidity of caste. But I don't think it's quite active like that. And, but you know, I don't feel bad about having been more optimistic about something for two reasons. First of all, there's scope for learning, which is important, particularly if you're ABC. It's extremely important to learn new things. But secondly, if I had been more optimistic, I'm glad that I erred in that direction rather than the opposite. But yes, we had to do a lot more in dealing with that issue. And I think because this would be a problem which will be with us for a long, long time, unless we really speed up what we are trying to do. There are a lot of people are fighting against it, and within the class themselves, a lot of people have organized. I think the one big problem I see is the tendency not to have a united law caste position. You see, if you look at the labor movement in Britain, it began with factional things, textile workers, iron workers, coal workers, different. I think the strength came when there was a defined working class. There was a labor party which did something which could not be done otherwise on the basis of the fragmentary position. We are very much into fragmentary position, and caste gives them a kind of sanctity to the fragmentation. And that, I think, probably does an enormous amount of harm in eliminating, in not being able to achieve annihilation of caste. So I think that's pay real attention. What happens in election time, and that's one of the reasons why the distinction between voters and people is important. Because at the time of election, each party seemed to exploit as much as possible the narrower identity of Yadavs and each group to get those groups to come and vote for you. On the other hand, ultimately, I mean, you may win an election or you may not, but ultimately for the annihilation of caste, you have to go well beyond those distinctions. And would it come about through coalition politics, with Lalu Yadav and Nitish being together, eliminate the distinction between castes? I said not. So we need more. I mean, that was a very good thing to do, and there was good leadership present there. But I think we have to think of it in much broader terms as an exercise that we have to engage in the future. So I'm glad that you raised that question, Prabhat. Thank you.